We're back at it again. This time we're going to be working on the chassis. As you may recall, I'm using an aftermarket tub chassis here. I'm just doing a quick comparison. The aftermarket one looks a bit shorter. Hope that's not a problem. All I've really done here so far is just clean all the flashing and all the mold lines off of this. If you remember in the unboxing, it was pretty gnarly. All these mounting holes have been plugged, so I'm just using the tip of my blade there to create a pilot hole just so I know where to start drilling. And take note of my finger back there. As I mentioned several times, resin is very brittle, so make sure you got something supporting it at all times or you will break it. This thing is a mess. If I had to do it all over again, and I probably will, I would just buy another kit that's already tubbed, cut the back half of it off and modify the original chassis. If I had to do it all again, I'd definitely do that. If you remember the unboxing, I noticed this was broken. We're just going to use a bit of super glue to glue it together, and we have to do it twice because I'm an idiot and I didn't clean any of the mold release off that, so the first glue in did not take. This stuff is a whole lot easier when you just pull out the nozzle and get one single drop exactly where you need it. It's less wasteful and it's less messy. And to knock the bulk of this off, I'm just going to use a razor saw. I'm afraid if I use my nippers, it's going to be kind of harsh on this and break it. And this saw is just in the woodworking section at your favorite hobby store. It usually comes with a big red handle. I just took that off because it doesn't fit in my little cubby hole thing I got going on here. Luckily this extra flashing was nice and thin, so I just easily scraped it off of the blade. doing this, I'm realizing that the top and the bottom half don't actually match. I'm guessing the dude who cast this had a mold shift and then just said, you know what, I don't care, I'm gonna send it out. Now, while I'd prefer a perfect kit, I'm a modeler. I could make this work. Some of you may notice his body is no longer painted. Since I'm not following any set of instructions, there's really no rhyme or reason, just whatever I feel like building at the time. So you'll notice a lot of this is out of continuity. Now, luckily, I did not have to narrow this rear end at all. It would be easy enough to do, but I didn't have to, so I'm happy for that. And to mount these wheels to the axle, I lucked out as I didn't actually throw away the charger kit like I said in the unboxing. I actually used it for a lot of parts on this kit. And I said I lucked out because that hole fits the axle pin perfectly. And that flange right there fits inside the wheels perfectly. So with a bit of trimming, this is how easy this was. And I still don't have the wheels glued together yet, so the offset's kind of throwing me off a bit. But these fit perfectly, and they fill up that wheel well just like I wanted them to. In the real world, I would call this a backing plate, much like what you'd find on a set of drum brakes. So to make that work, all I did was just cut off that raised lip that goes around it. Then clean up my nasty cut marks and make it smooth. And going this route, from the distance and looking in through the holes in the wheels, it kind of makes it look like a disc brake. Now, I eventually realized the problem was the wheel and not this backing plate. So I just cleaned that up very lightly with a round file. There we go. Now we got a secure way to mount this wheel, and yes, it looks like we got disc brake back there too. I'd also recommend reading the instructions. I didn't think I'd follow them at all since I'm going purely custom on this. These spindles need to go in before the K-member goes in. What I had to do is I had to cut a bevel on both sides and kind of just wedge it in there. And I was so afraid that this brittle resin would break. But I got lucky. Mounting the front wheels, it's a little bit more complex, but we used a lot more just leftover parts from other kits. I could have just mounted it like that, but that just leaves too much wheel well and it's ugly. So we need to figure out how to tastefully space those out. Those are the rotors from the F40 kit. If you remember right, I used photo etch and completely replaced them. So I got a nice set of disc brakes left over. So we're going to use them. And mostly while I'm doing this build, I thought that a lot of this was meant to be. It just fits together too conveniently. The wheel flange for the factory kit fits the mounting tab for the F40 brakes, just flawlessly. And that combination lets me space out the front wheel just enough to make it look good and still realistically leave enough room in there so you could turn the wheels. And beforehand, I washed this 2 or 3 times with a toothbrush and soap and water to get all the mold really soft. And here I'm just spraying all the nooks and crannies to make sure all the water and soap's gone. 2K primer or any of the pre-thin primers you get from the big names like splash paints or zero paints doesn't tend to stick that well in my experience to resin. But this, to me, a rattle can stuff sticks just fine. It's hard to see, but I got some paint bubbling there because I didn't wash all the mold release off. Now the wheels are supposed to be polished aluminum. For that, I'm using the Testors brand Chrome. And a little bit of this stuff goes a very long way. As you can see, I am as far out as my arms could reach and just barely misting it on. And it still covers too thickly. Just be careful with this stuff. And after it dries for a few hours, it is the best match to polished aluminum I could find. Look at that. If you ever look at any of these old A bodies or B bodies, they're all just black. Not even undercoating, it's all just black. So that's what I'm going with here. And as I'm doing a race car, I don't want to run that mechanical fan, so I went through my parts box and found an electric fan. This, if I remember right, is from Revell's 458 Italia. Once assembled, you can't see it, so I didn't waste time putting it in there. That mentality leaves me a lot of spare parts left over to use on other kits. And as we sit, this whole assembly is too wide, so I'm just going to narrow it down a bit. What I'm going for is one of the aftermarket fans that zip tie in through the radiator core. This is what I got after a little bit of work. I just glued the flanges together. Luckily the core in the radiator was exactly 1 inch, and my cutting mat is 1 inch, so perfect jig I had back there. And I haven't glued it in yet because I want to mock it all together so I know where to space it up or down, just so it clears all the pulleys better. It's probably a good thing I didn't glue them in because there is no room for them. So depending on how visible everything is once it's assembled, I might mount them on the front of the radiator and just have them set up as pusher fans. Yeah, again, there's no order of anything here, just how I felt like building it. So we're going from the fans to the wheels. These wheels did not come with center caps, which is somewhat to my advantage because I got to make some exactly the way I needed them. And I did that with a piece of old sprue. Give you a quick runaround of how all this is going to look when it's all together. So, let me show you how I did that. Anytime you do something like this, the best way to see if you got everything centered is to simply spin it. If you don't see any noticeable run out on the edges, it's concentric. It's good. The rotor is 2mm thick, so I'm going to cut that pen around 3mm just to have a little extra meat to work with. Now this does space the wheel out a little bit from the brakes, and it looks a bit janky, but if you've ever seen a race car with these skinny tires, it's kind of how it looks. So it's not out of place, it just looks kind of goofy. That's it, the wheels are done. If I had to do this again, I would have used the K-member from the Charger kit just because it's wider, and I would have had to do a lot less spacing and janky-fying everything to make it look good. Now you may have noticed from the tub's back, I just misted it with some aluminum paint just to give it that fabricated look, because these are all made out of bead rolled sheet aluminum. If you remember right, there was some core shift on one side, which actually worked out well for me because I got to French it in there, and it's a lot stronger than what it would have been using the pen. And I ended up just using the shocks that came with the kit. I wasn't going to mount them up, do a coilover type thing, and I had some springs in there, and it just looked too bulky and out of place, so I just went with this. And I don't know what happened, but as you can see, the axle settled in there, but for some reason one of the shocks came out kind of at an angle. And I don't know why, but this entire chassis just glue did not want to stick to it. You could see that puddle of wet glue in there. It still took 3 attempts just to get this glued in. It just did not stick. Look at that. I don't know what's going on. And I threw that core support in there just so I knew the spacing for my inner fenders. And I'm not sure how or where, because everything fit just fine during mock-up, but now that drivetrain is a little bit too long. A real simple remedy, all I did was just sand a little bit off the tail shaft of the transmission till everything fit. And these make a guest appearance again because I filmed and built all this weeks apart, and I don't remember if I talked about that or not, but I did. So you get to see my failure once again. And as I've been working with this resin, I realize everything requires a lot of glue to get anything just to barely stick to it. And again, a lot of glue. And lastly, I use a half a tube of glue just to get this core support to stick. And I'll paint all that over later, so it's not a big deal. It just, I shouldn't have to come to that. And lastly, I'm just going to use the upper radiator hose from the donor kit, because it looks better to scale than what came with the Lindberg kit. That's it though, guys. Chassis is done. I want to thank you again for sticking around. I'm going to finish this kit soon.